Hi, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Alexandra Rivera. My brother stole my Purple Heart medal that I earned after losing my leg in Afghanistan, then sold it for drug money while telling our family I was lying about my service. He thought my husband being stationed overseas meant he could destroy my honor without consequences and I'd stay quiet to protect our reputation. But sometimes justice arrives with 4 stars on its collar, delivered by a father-in-law.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you.
Who happened to be chairman of the Joint Chiefs with direct access to the Pentagon. What happened next didn't just restore my medal, it showed my brother exactly what happens when you steal from America's heroes. The Purple Heart sits in a place of honor in most veterans' homes, a tangible reminder of sacrifice made for country and freedom. Mine had been displayed in our family room in Colorado Springs in a shadow box alongside my other commendations from 15 years of Army service, including 3 combat deployments. I'd earned that Purple Heart on October 15, 2018, outside Kandahar when our convoy hit an IED. The explosion killed 2 of my soldiers and shattered my left leg so severely that doctors had to amputate below the knee. I spent 8 months learning to walk again with a prosthetic, fighting through phantom pain and PTSD, determined to continue serving my country despite the injury. My brother David had always struggled with my military success. 5 years older than me, he'd tried to enlist twice, but was rejected both times, once for a juvenile drug conviction and again for failing the psychological evaluation. While I was earning my commission through West Point and rising through the ranks, David was bouncing between dead-end jobs and battling addiction. When I returned from Afghanistan with my injury, David's resentment intensified. He'd make comments about government handouts and playing the victim card whenever family members praised my service or asked about my recovery. He seemed genuinely offended that I received military disability benefits and medical care for my combat injuries. "Must be nice getting paid to sit around and feel sorry for yourself," he'd say during family gatherings, always just quietly enough that our parents couldn't hear clearly. My husband, Major General James Harrison, was currently deployed to Germany as part of NATO operations. We'd met at the Pentagon when I was working in strategic planning, and his father, General Robert Harrison, was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest-ranking military officer in the United States. James and I had been married for 3 years, and I'd grown to love his father like my own. General Harrison had always treated me with the utmost respect, calling me Colonel even in family settings, and frequently asking about my thoughts on current military policy. He'd been instrumental in supporting my recovery and return to active duty after my injury. The theft happened while James was overseas, and I was visiting my parents in Denver for my father's 65th birthday celebration. I'd driven up from Colorado Springs for the weekend, bringing my dress uniform to wear during the military tribute planned for the party. My father was a Vietnam veteran, and the family always honored military service at special occasions. David had been living in my parents' basement for 6 months, supposedly getting clean and looking for work. Mom always defended him, saying he was going through a difficult time and needed family support. Dad was less sympathetic, but tolerated the arrangement for Mom's sake. During the birthday dinner, I noticed David seemed agitated and kept leaving the room to make phone calls. When family members asked about my service and recent promotion to Lieutenant Colonel, he'd interrupt with comments about military propaganda and glorifying violence. I didn't think much of his behavior. David had always been bitter about my achievements. But when I returned to my car to head home to Colorado Springs, I discovered that my uniform bag had been opened and rifled through. My Purple Heart was missing.
I confronted David immediately, finding him in the basement playing video games while our parents cleaned up from the birthday dinner upstairs. "David, my Purple Heart is missing from my uniform bag. Did you see anyone near my car?" He didn't even look up from his screen. "How would I know? I've been down here all night." It was in a secure case inside my garment bag. Someone would have had to specifically look for it. David finally paused his game and turned to face me with an expression I'd seen countless times growing up, the innocent confusion he'd perfected whenever caught in wrongdoing. "Alex, are you seriously accusing me of stealing your medal? That's pretty paranoid even for you." "I'm not accusing anyone. I'm asking if you saw anything unusual." "Maybe you just misplaced it. You know, with the PTSD and all the medications, sometimes people forget things." His voice carried that familiar, condescending tone that suggested my combat injuries had somehow damaged my mental capacity. The suggestion that my war wounds made me unreliable cut deep. But I stayed focused. "David, that medal doesn't just disappear. It's worth significant money to collectors." "Are you saying I stole it to sell it?" David's voice rose with manufactured outrage. "Jesus, Alex, your paranoia is getting out of hand. First, you come home from Afghanistan acting like some kind of war hero. Now you're accusing your own brother of theft?" I heard footsteps on the basement stairs. Mom appeared, looking concerned about the raised voices. "What's going on down here?" "David thinks I stole her medal," David said, perfectly timing his response to ensure Mom heard his side first. "She's accusing me of being a thief." Mom's face immediately shifted to protective mode. Not for me, but for David. "Alexandra, honey, that's a serious accusation. Are you sure you didn't just forget to pack it?" "Mom, I had it in my uniform case when I arrived. Now it's gone." "David's been here with us all evening. He helped me with the dishes and took out the trash. He hasn't been anywhere near your car." I looked at David, who was wearing an expression of hurt innocence that I remembered from childhood, the same look he'd used when denying he'd broken windows, stolen money from Mom's purse, or cheated on tests. "Maybe someone broke into your car," David suggested helpfully. "You know, this neighborhood isn't as safe as it used to be. Lots of addicts around here looking for things to steal and sell." The irony of a drug addict suggesting other addicts might be responsible wasn't lost on me, but Mom nodded as if this explanation made perfect sense. "That must be it," she said. "We should call the police and report a break-in." "There's no sign of forced entry. The car was locked and nothing else was disturbed." "Well, maybe you forgot to lock it," Mom said, clearly preferring any explanation that didn't involve David. "You've been under a lot of stress with James deployed and your new position at the base." David nodded sympathetically. "PTSD can affect memory and judgment. Maybe you should talk to someone about these paranoid thoughts about family members." He was gaslighting me, using my combat injuries and mental health struggles as weapons to make me question my own perceptions. And Mom was enabling him, choosing to believe his explanation over the obvious evidence. "I know what I packed, and I know what's missing," I said firmly. "Alex, sweetheart," Mom said gently, "I think you're upset and looking for someone to blame. David would never steal from you, especially something so meaningful. Maybe we should focus on filing a police report instead of making accusations." As I drove back to Colorado Springs that night, I realized that David had successfully positioned himself as the victim of my paranoid accusations while maintaining his innocence. Mom was already defending him, and I had no proof beyond the obvious fact that my Purple Heart had disappeared while David was the only person with opportunity. But David had made one crucial mistake. He'd stolen from a lieutenant colonel whose father-in-law had more military authority than anyone else in the country. Over the next week, David's campaign to discredit me intensified. What had started as denying the theft became a systematic effort to convince our family that my military service had left me psychologically unstable and prone to paranoid delusions. He began calling relatives with carefully crafted stories about my concerning behavior since returning from Afghanistan. I only learned about these conversations when my cousin Maria called to check on me. "Alex, David's been telling everyone you're having problems adjusting to civilian life," she said during our phone conversation. He says you've been making wild accusations and that your doctors are worried about your mental state.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
What exactly did he tell you? He said the explosion in Afghanistan affected your brain more than anyone realized, and that you've been having episodes where you imagine things that didn't happen. He mentioned something about you accusing him of stealing from you, but he made it sound like a symptom of PTSD rather than a real incident. David was systematically poisoning my reputation within our extended family, using the stigma around mental health and combat trauma to make my accusations seem like evidence of psychological breakdown rather than legitimate concerns about theft. But his most damaging escalation came when he started targeting my military career directly. I discovered this when my commanding officer, Colonel Peterson, called me into his office for what he described as a welfare check. "Rivera, I received a concerning call from someone claiming to be your brother," Peterson said, his expression serious. "He suggested you might be struggling with some personal issues that could affect your security clearance." My blood ran cold. Security clearance issues could end my career instantly, especially for someone in my position handling classified strategic planning. "What kind of issues, sir?" "According to the caller, you've been exhibiting paranoid behavior, making false accusations against family members, and showing signs of psychological instability." He claimed to be worried about your access to sensitive information. David had weaponized the military's necessary caution around mental health issues, knowing that any suggestion of psychological problems would trigger mandatory evaluations and potential suspension of my clearance. "Sir, my brother has addiction issues and has been resentful of my military success for years. This sounds like retaliation for questioning him about a missing Purple Heart." Colonel Peterson studied me carefully. "Rivera, I've worked with you for 2 years. You've shown exemplary judgment and stability. But when family members express concerns about an officer's mental state, we have to take it seriously." "I understand, sir. I'm happy to undergo any evaluation you deem necessary." "That won't be required at this time, but I need you to be aware that additional complaints could trigger a formal review process." David's strategy was becoming clear. He wasn't just trying to cover up the theft, he was attempting to destroy my military career by portraying me as mentally unstable. Every time I mentioned the missing medal, it would seem like further evidence of my supposed paranoid delusions. The situation escalated further when Mom called to inform me that David had been researching PTSD treatment options for me and had found a facility that specialized in helping veterans with reality perception issues. "He's really worried about you, honey. He thinks you need professional help before these paranoid episodes get worse." "Mom, I'm not having paranoid episodes. My Purple Heart was stolen, and David is the only person who had access to it." "Alex, sweetheart, Dr. Collins at the VA said that trauma can sometimes make people fixate on imaginary problems as a way of avoiding dealing with their real issues." "You talked to Dr. Collins about me?" "David was concerned enough to call them. He just wants to help you get better." David had contacted my VA psychiatrist, violating my medical privacy and spinning a narrative about my supposed deteriorating mental state. He positioned himself as the caring brother trying to help his troubled veteran sister, while simultaneously undermining my credibility and career. But David's most devastating move was yet to come. 3 days later, I received a package in the mail with no return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping about veterans who fabricate combat stories and steal valor from real heroes. The message was clear. David was threatening to publicly accuse me of lying about my military service, turning his theft of my medal into evidence that I'd never earned it in the first place.
The humiliation reached its peak at the annual Veterans Day ceremony at the Colorado Springs Veterans Memorial. As a lieutenant colonel and local war hero, I'd been invited to speak about service and sacrifice to a crowd of over 300 veterans, active duty personnel, and community members. It should have been an honor. Instead, it became the stage for David's most devastating attack. I arrived at the memorial park in my dress uniform, prepared to deliver remarks about the meaning of military service and the bonds forged in combat. The ceremony was being covered by local media, with several news stations broadcasting live coverage of the community's tribute to veterans. Halfway through my speech about the courage of our fallen comrades, I noticed a commotion in the audience. David had arrived, accompanied by two people I didn't recognize, and was making his way toward the media area where reporters were stationed. I continued speaking, but I could see David talking animatedly to a reporter from Channel 7 News, gesturing toward me and showing her something on his phone. The reporter's expression shifted from polite interest to serious concern as she listened to whatever David was telling her. As I concluded my remarks to respectful applause, the reporter approached the stage with her cameraman. I assumed they wanted a brief interview about my speech or my military service. "Lieutenant Colonel Rivera," the reporter called out, her voice carrying across the memorial grounds. "We've received some concerning information about your military record. Do you have a response to allegations that you've been making false claims about your service?" The question hit like a physical blow. 300 people, including dozens of fellow veterans and active duty personnel, turned to stare at me as I stood frozen at the podium. "I'm sorry, what allegations?" "A family member has provided evidence suggesting that you may have fabricated details about your combat service and illegally possessed military decorations you didn't earn." David stepped forward from the crowd, his face a mask of reluctant concern. "I didn't want it to come to this," he called out loudly enough for everyone to hear. "But my sister has been struggling with PTSD and has started making claims about her military service that aren't supported by her actual record." The crowd was murmuring now, some looking confused, others appearing to believe David's performance of the concerned brother forced to expose uncomfortable truths. "Lieutenant Colonel Rivera," the reporter continued, "do you currently possess a Purple Heart medal?" The trap was perfectly set. If I said yes, David would claim I was lying since the medal was missing. If I said no, it would appear to confirm his allegations that I'd never earned one. "My Purple Heart was recently stolen," I said, my voice carrying over the suddenly silent memorial grounds. David shook his head sadly. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. She's been claiming someone stole a medal she never had. I've checked with the VA and the Army Records Office. There's no documentation of her receiving a Purple Heart." The lie was so audacious, so completely fabricated, that I was momentarily speechless. David was publicly accusing me of stolen valor in front of hundreds of veterans, many of whom had served with distinction and had zero tolerance for anyone who would fake military honors. "That's absolutely false," I said, but I could hear how defensive I sounded. "My wounded in action on October 15th, 2018, and received the Purple Heart from General Martinez at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center." "Do you have documentation of this award?" the reporter pressed. "The original paperwork is in my personnel file at the Pentagon. The physical medal was stolen by—" I stopped myself before accusing David directly on live television, but the pause made me look evasive. David seized the moment. "She's been having these episodes since returning from deployment, making up stories, imagining events that didn't happen. Our family has been trying to get her help, but she refuses treatment." Several veterans in the audience were now looking at me with suspicion and disgust, the exact reaction David had been orchestrating. In the military community, stolen valor was considered one of the most despicable acts possible, a betrayal of everyone who had served with honor. "I think we have enough," the reporter said, signaling to her cameraman to stop recording. As I left the memorial grounds, I could hear the whispered conversations following me. David had successfully turned a Veterans Day ceremony into my public humiliation, using my own service and sacrifice against me, while positioning himself as the hero exposing a fraud. The story would air on the evening news, broadcast to the entire Colorado Springs community. My reputation, my honor, and my military career were being destroyed in real time, and there was nothing I could do to stop it.
The breaking point came 3 days after the Veterans Day humiliation when I received a call from my father-in-law, General Robert Harrison, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I had been dreading this conversation, knowing that David's public accusations would eventually reach the highest levels of military leadership. Alexandra, his voice was measured and serious. I saw the news coverage from Colorado Springs. I need to ask you directly, are the allegations about your Purple Heart accurate? The question from the most senior military officer in the United States felt like a knife to the chest. This was the man who had welcomed me into his family, who had spoken proudly of my service at Pentagon gatherings, who had called me one of the finest officers he'd ever known. General Harrison, I earned that Purple Heart after losing my leg in an IED explosion outside Kandahar. Your son was at Landstuhl when I received it. He can verify. James is in the middle of NATO exercises and can't be reached for several days, General Harrison interrupted. But Alexandra, I have to tell you that I've received calls from 3 different Pentagon officials asking about your mental fitness and the validity of your military decorations. My worst fears were materializing. David's campaign had reached the Pentagon itself, threatening not just my career, but potentially embarrassing the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff through his association with me. Sir, my brother has addiction issues and has been systematically trying to destroy my reputation since I confronted him about stealing my medal. He's weaponized my PTSD diagnosis to make his theft seem like my delusion. That's a very serious accusation, Alexandra. You're suggesting that a family member orchestrated an elaborate fraud to discredit your military service. Yes, sir, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When General Harrison spoke again, his voice carried a note of disappointment that crushed me. Alexandra, I've known you for 3 years. You're intelligent, capable, and have served with distinction, but the evidence being presented suggests a pattern of instability that's deeply concerning. What evidence? Medical professionals from the VA have expressed concerns about your mental state. Your commanding officer received reports about erratic behavior, and now there are public questions about the legitimacy of your decorations. I realized that David hadn't just stolen my medal. He'd built an entire case file of manufactured evidence designed to destroy my credibility with the most powerful military leader in the country. Sir, with respect, have you verified any of this evidence independently? I don't need to verify it, Alexandra. The fact that these questions are being raised publicly is damaging enough. The Pentagon can't afford to have the integrity of our award system questioned, especially when it involves the family of senior leadership. The implication was clear. I was becoming a liability to General Harrison's reputation and position. Sir, are you asking me to resign my commission? I'm asking you to consider what's best for everyone involved. If these allegations continue to escalate, there will have to be a formal investigation. That investigation will be public, comprehensive, and potentially devastating to multiple careers. I understood the message. General Harrison was giving me the option to quietly disappear before the scandal grew large enough to damage his own standing as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I need time to think, I said. You have 48 hours to decide how you want to handle the situation. After that, the Pentagon will be forced to take official action. After hanging up, I sat in my empty house, James deployed, my family turned against me, my military career hanging by a thread, and realized that David had achieved everything he'd set out to accomplish. He'd stolen my Purple Heart, convinced my family I was mentally unstable, destroyed my reputation in the veteran community, and now forced the highest military leadership in the country to question my fitness for service? For the first time since returning from Afghanistan, I considered whether fighting was worth it anymore. David had systematically dismantled everything I'd worked for, and even my father-in-law was suggesting I should just quietly surrender rather than continue defending myself. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe I should just resign, disappear, and let David have his victory. But then I remembered the weight of that Purple Heart in my hands when General Martinez had pinned it to my hospital gown, and the words he'd spoken. "This medal represents more than your sacrifice, Colonel. It represents the honor of every soldier who has bled for this country."
That night, sitting in my empty house with General Harrison's ultimatum weighing on me, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being David's victim and allowing him to destroy not just my honor, but the integrity of military decorations earned through blood and sacrifice. If David wanted to play games with evidence and false accusations, I would show him what a real military investigation looked like. I would use every resource, every connection, and every skill I'd learned in 15 years of Army service to expose his lies and restore my honor. My first step was to contact the one person who could verify my Purple Heart Award beyond any doubt, General Carlos Martinez, who had personally presented the medal to me at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center. He was now serving as Deputy Chief of Staff of the Army at the Pentagon. "General Martinez, this is Lieutenant Colonel Alexandra Rivera. I served under your command in Afghanistan and received the Purple Heart from you in October 2018. "Colonel Rivera, of course I remember you. How's the recovery going? I heard you'd returned to active duty." "Sir, I'm calling because my Purple Heart was stolen by my brother, and he's now publicly claiming I never earned it. The accusations have reached General Harrison and are threatening my career." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "Someone is claiming you didn't earn the Purple Heart I personally pinned to your hospital gown? The medal you received after losing your leg saving 2 of your soldiers?" "Yes, sir. My brother has convinced my family and the media that I'm having PTSD-related delusions about my service record." "Colonel, this is not just an attack on you. This is an attack on the integrity of our entire award system. Give me 12 hours. My next call was to Master Sergeant Williams, who had served as my senior NCO in Afghanistan and had been present when the IED exploded. He was now stationed at Fort Carson, just an hour from Colorado Springs. "Rivera, I heard some bullshit on the news about your Purple Heart. Tell me someone isn't actually questioning whether you earned that medal." "That's exactly what's happening, Williams. My brother stole it and is claiming I never received it." "Ma'am, with respect, your brother is about to learn what happens when you mess with the wrong soldier. I've got the after-action report from that IED attack, photos from the scene, and medical records from the evacuation. Want me to pay him a visit?" "Not yet, but I need you to document everything you remember about that day and my injury." But my most important call was to someone I'd hoped never to contact for personal matters. Colonel Sarah Chen from the Pentagon's Criminal Investigation Division. We'd worked together on a fraud case 2 years earlier, and she specialized in stolen valor investigations. "Colonel Chen, I need your expertise on a stolen valor case, but it's complicated because I'm the victim being accused of the crime." "Rivera, I heard about the Colorado Springs incident. That's a serious allegation against an active duty officer. It's also completely fabricated. My brother stole my Purple Heart and is using my PTSD diagnosis to claim I'm delusional about my own service record. If what you're saying is true, we're looking at multiple federal crimes: theft of military property, stolen valor fraud, and potentially conspiracy to commit fraud against the United States military. I need help building a case that will stand up to Pentagon scrutiny." "Colonel, if you're innocent of these charges, I'll personally see to it that the truth comes out. But if there's any truth to the allegations—" "There isn't. I have documentation, witnesses, and medical records proving every aspect of my service." "Then we're going to destroy whoever is responsible for this attack on military honor." Over the next 24 hours, I systematically assembled a case file that would make David's lies impossible to maintain. General Martinez sent copies of my award citation and ceremony photos. Master Sergeant Williams provided the official after-action report and witness statements. Colonel Chen began a formal investigation into David's claims and discovered that he'd never actually contacted the VA or Army Records Office as he'd claimed. But my most powerful evidence came from an unexpected source:
the online marketplace where David had sold my Purple Heart. The auction site maintained records of all transactions, including photos of the items sold and the seller's information. I found my Purple Heart listed under David's account, sold 3 days after my father's birthday party for $2,400 to a private collector in Texas. The listing included photos of the medal with my name engraved on the back, and David's account was linked to his personal email address and phone number. He documented his own crime and his greed to profit from my sacrifice. I now had irrefutable proof that David had stolen my medal, sold it for drug money, and then orchestrated an elaborate cover-up by accusing me of stolen valor. The evidence was so overwhelming that no rational person could continue to doubt my innocence. It was time to present this evidence to General Harrison and demand justice for the systematic attack on my honor and the integrity of military decorations.
With the initial evidence secured, I knew I needed to build an ironclad case that would not only clear my name, but expose the full scope of David's deception. If I was going to challenge accusations that had reached the Pentagon, I needed evidence so overwhelming that no one could question my integrity ever again. Colonel Chen's investigation had uncovered that David's claims about contacting military records offices were completely fabricated. When she called the VA and Army Personnel Command asking about inquiries into my service record, they had no record of anyone requesting information about my Purple Heart or questioning its validity. Rivera, your brother never made a single official inquiry, Colonel Chen reported during our secure phone call. He simply lied about having documentation to support his claims. But there's more. I've discovered he's been using your personal information to access veteran benefit websites illegally. What kind of access? He's somehow obtained your Social Security number and service member ID to log into veteran benefit websites. He's been researching the monetary value of military decorations and the process for reporting stolen valor cases. This wasn't impulsive theft, it was premeditated fraud. Colonel Chen had also discovered that David had created multiple fake social media accounts to spread rumors about my mental state and military service. He'd been posting in veteran Facebook groups, claiming to be a concerned family member, asking for advice about a relative who was fabricating military service for attention. But my most significant breakthrough came when I contacted the collector who had purchased my Purple Heart. Colonel Chen had provided his information from the auction site records, and I called him directly. Mr. Peterson, my name is Lieutenant Colonel Alexandra Rivera. You recently purchased a Purple Heart medal from an online auction. That medal was stolen from me by my brother. Ma'am, I had no idea it was stolen property. The seller claimed it belonged to his deceased grandfather, and he was selling it to pay for funeral expenses. David had created an elaborate backstory to justify selling the medal, even fabricating a fake family history to manipulate the buyer's sympathy. Mr. Peterson, would you be willing to cooperate with a military investigation and return the medal to its rightful owner? Absolutely, Colonel. I'm a veteran myself, and the idea that someone would steal and sell another person's Purple Heart makes me sick. I'll ship it back to you immediately and provide any documentation you need. The collector also revealed that David had contacted him after the sale, offering to sell additional military memorabilia, including bronze stars and silver stars from other family members. David was apparently running a systematic operation to steal and sell military decorations. My investigation took a darker turn when I contacted my aunt Rebecca, who had served as a Navy corpsman during the Gulf War. I'd always wondered why she stopped attending family gatherings and rarely spoke to David. Alex, I've been waiting years for someone to ask me about David, she said when I called. 3 years ago, he broke into my house and stole my combat action ribbon and Navy commendation medal. When I accused him, he convinced the family I was having alcohol-related memory problems. The pattern was becoming clear. David had been systematically targeting military family members, stealing their decorations, and then discrediting them when they tried to report the thefts. He told everyone I was drinking too much and imagining things, Rebecca continued. He even staged an intervention where he presented evidence of my supposed alcohol problem.
The family believed him, and I was so humiliated that I stopped coming to family events. Do you have any proof of the theft? I filed a police report, but David convinced our parents not to pursue it. He said it would destroy the family if I pressed charges against him. But I still have the report number and photos of the medals before they were stolen. Rebecca's testimony established that David had been operating a stolen valor scheme for years, targeting vulnerable family members and using psychological manipulation to cover his crimes. But the most damaging evidence came from an unexpected source, David's own drug dealer. Master Sergeant Williams had contacts in local law enforcement who were investigating drug trafficking in the Denver area. When they learned that military medals were being sold for drug money, they became very interested in David's activities. Detective Martinez from the Denver Police Department called me directly. Colonel Rivera, we've been tracking cash transactions between your brother and a known drug dealer named Tommy Vasquez. Vasquez told us that David has been selling military medals and memorabilia for drug money over the past 2 years. Has Vasquez seen the specific medals David sold? He described your Purple Heart in detail, including the engraving with your name. He also mentioned bronze stars, silver stars, and other decorations that David claimed belonged to various dead relatives. Vasquez thought it was suspicious, but didn't realize they were stolen until we started asking questions. I now had documented proof that David had been running a multi-year operation to steal military decorations from family members, sell them for drug money, and then destroy the victims' credibility when they tried to report the crimes. The evidence was overwhelming. Online auction records, witness testimony, police reports, VA database violations, fake social media campaigns, and drug dealer testimony, all pointing to David as a systematic predator who had been stealing military honor for years.
As Colonel Chen's investigation deepened, she uncovered something that transformed our case from theft and fraud into a national security issue that would reach the highest levels of government. "Rivera, you need to come to the Pentagon immediately," Colonel Chen said during an encrypted call. "What we've discovered about your brother goes far beyond stealing military medals. This is a federal crime spree that's been operating for years." I flew to Washington, D.C. the next morning and met Colonel Chen in a secure conference room at the Pentagon. The evidence she had assembled was staggering in its scope and sophistication. "David Rivera isn't just a drug addict stealing from family members," she began, spreading files across the table. "He's been running a nationwide stolen valor ring that's compromised the integrity of military decorations across multiple states." The investigation had revealed that David was part of an organized network that specifically targeted veteran families, stealing military medals and selling them to collectors while destroying the victim's credibility to prevent prosecution. We've identified at least 47 cases over the past 5 years where military decorations were stolen from veterans, sold online, and then the veterans were discredited when they tried to report the thefts. Your brother was a key operator in this network. Colonel Chen showed me case files from across the country. A Marine Silver Star stolen by his nephew in California, a Navy SEAL's Bronze Star taken by his sister in Florida, an Air Force pilot's Distinguished Flying Cross stolen by her brother-in-law in Texas. In each case, when the veterans reported the thefts, they were accused of mental instability, PTSD-related delusions, or even stolen valor themselves. The network specifically targets veterans with PTSD diagnoses, combat injuries, or family members who can be manipulated into believing the veteran is mentally unstable. It's psychological warfare designed to silence the victims. But the most shocking discovery was the financial scope of the operation. The Stolen Valor Network had generated over $2.8 million in illegal revenue over 5 years, with David personally responsible for at least $340,000 in stolen military decorations. They've been selling to private collectors, historical societies, and even some legitimate military museums that unknowingly purchased stolen items. We're talking about Purple Hearts earned on D-Day, Bronze Stars from Vietnam, Silver Stars from Iraq and Afghanistan, medals representing some of our nation's greatest acts of heroism. Colonel Chen pulled out a thick file with David's communications. But here's what elevates this to a national security issue. Your brother has been in contact with foreign collectors, specifically individuals connected to a Russian oligarch who collects American military memorabilia. The room went silent as the implications sank in. David has been selling American military decorations to foreign nationals, including medals earned in conflicts where American forces fought against Russian-backed militias. This isn't just theft, it's potentially treasonous activity that undermines American military honor on an international scale. The investigation had traced communications between David and a Moscow-based collector who had specifically requested Purple Hearts and Silver Stars earned in Afghanistan and Syria, conflicts where American forces had directly opposed Russian interests. We believe the foreign collection is part of a broader psychological warfare campaign designed to demoralize American veterans and desecrate the symbols of our nation's military sacrifice. Your brother's theft of your Purple Heart was the final piece we needed to unravel this entire network. The investigation you triggered has exposed a multi-state criminal organization with international connections that threatens the integrity of American military decorations. Colonel Rivera, your brother's theft of your Purple Heart was the final piece we needed to unravel this entire network. The investigation you triggered has exposed a multi-state criminal organization with international connections that threatens the integrity of American military decorations. Colonel Chen directly looked at me. This case is now classified at the highest levels. The FBI, CIA, and military intelligence are coordinating a joint operation to dismantle the entire network. Your brother's arrest will be part of a coordinated takedown that will happen simultaneously across multiple states. I stared at the evidence spread across the table, realizing that David's theft of my Purple Heart had uncovered a threat to national security that reached into the highest levels of government and international espionage. My Purple Heart hadn't just been stolen by my brother, it had been stolen as part of a foreign operation designed to humiliate American veterans and desecrate the symbols of our nation's military sacrifice.
The confrontation happened in General Harrison's Pentagon office with myself, Colonel Chen, General Martinez, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs reviewing the evidence that would completely vindicate my honor and expose David's criminal network. General Harrison, I began, placing the comprehensive case file on his desk. I have irrefutable evidence that proves my innocence and exposes a national security threat. Colonel Chen presented the investigation findings methodically. Sir, David Rivera has been operating as part of a foreign-connected stolen valor network that has compromised American military decorations for years. He stole Lieutenant Colonel Rivera's Purple Heart as part of this operation. General Harrison's expression shifted from skepticism to shock as he reviewed the evidence. The auction records, the Russian connections, the $2.8 million in stolen military honor, and the 47 other victims across the country. You're telling me that my daughter-in-law's brother has been selling American military decorations to Russian intelligence operatives? General Harrison's voice carried the cold fury of the nation's highest military officer. Yes, sir. And he used her PTSD diagnosis to discredit her when she tried to report the theft, nearly destroying her career and reputation in the process. General Martinez added, Sir, this attack on Colonel Rivera was also an attack on the integrity of our entire award system. We cannot allow veterans to be victimized and then silenced through psychological warfare. General Harrison stood up, his 4 stars gleaming under the Pentagon office lights. Colonel Rivera, on behalf of the United States military, I apologize for doubting your honor. Your brother and his network have committed acts bordering on treason. What happens now, sir? Now, we show them what happens when they steal from America's heroes. I'm authorizing a joint military FBI operation to dismantle this entire network. Your brother will face federal charges for theft, fraud, and potentially espionage-related crimes. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs picked up his secure phone. I'm calling the president. This stolen valor network ends today.
3 months later, I stood in the Rose Garden as President Martinez awarded me the Defense Distinguished Service Medal for exposing the Stolen Valor Network. David was serving 25 years in federal prison for espionage-related crimes, and 47 other stolen medals had been returned to their rightful owners. But the most meaningful moment came when General Harrison personally returned my Purple Heart during a Pentagon ceremony attended by every victim of the network. "Colonel Rivera," he said, pinning the medal to my dress uniform, "this decoration represents not just your sacrifice in Afghanistan, but your courage in defending the honor of every American veteran." The Stolen Valor Network had been completely dismantled, with $2.8 million in stolen decorations recovered and the Russian connections severed. David's conviction had sent a clear message that stealing military honor was an attack on national security itself. My family finally understood the truth. Mom called to apologize, admitting she'd enabled David's manipulation for years. The veteran community that had doubted me now praised my persistence in exposing the network. James returned from deployment to find his wife had become a national hero for protecting military honor. General Harrison proudly introduced me as the colonel who saved American military integrity. Sometimes the greatest threats to our heroes come from within our own families. But sometimes, when that threat is exposed, justice arrives with the full power of the American military and shows the world exactly what happens when you steal from those who've bled for freedom. David learned that you never steal from America's heroes.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.